Hi, this is Mr. Kiwi. Today I'm going to do a brief, what I call a mini lecture about Desiree's baby to kind of just go over some of the key points. So I'm going to pull this up and we'll kind of go over it. Okay, so hopefully you did a little background on Kate Chopin. I would really encourage you, many of you who had me for English 102, you're already familiar with Kate Chopin. I think for any story we do, I think it'd be worth to do just a quick Wikipedia browse through it, see if there's any kind of information that might kind of help inform you as you're reading the author's story. I know that Maxine Hong Kingston, she's Asian American. You get a lot of information that, because her writing is really about that kind of tension of being, an Asian American, and especially the tension between trying to maintain the old and the new. So it'd be something to look at. So what I want to talk about today is in Desiree's baby, and I want to focus in on those kind of four key ideas I mentioned in the introduction, which are identity, transcendence, desire, and loss. Obviously, identity is huge in this story. It's the thing that drives everything else, okay? And really the component of identity in this story is race. And I think we all know living in America that still race is complicated, okay? So this is set in antebellum, which that's another word for pre-Civil War South. It's a plantation in Louisiana during the slave era. And this is a society or a culture where race determines really everything for a person. In a way, it's a central feature of one's identity, because race can determine your opportunity, wealth, status, power, and privilege. When it comes to race, especially in this world that this story is set in, the stakes are really high. You could be a slave, and even if you're the poorest white person in the neighborhood, I mean, the lowest, you can always go to bed feeling good that, no matter how bad things are for me, I'm not a slave. It's not that bad, okay? So, and that I have privileges that they don't have just by virtue of the color of my skin. So identity, and especially in this story, I don't even think it has a lot to do with gender. I think it's all just focused on race, okay? So again, I think, so when we talk about identity in this story, that's sort of the big one. Transcendence, okay? So if we look at race as the issue or conflict of this story, you kind of see that neither Desiree nor Armand can transcend the social and cultural impositions of race, okay? A lot of people would argue that race isn't really a thing. It's a social construct. It's something we've imposed on ourselves and decided that makes differences about things. So in this setting, the society or the culture, it determines anything. It's the central feature of one's identity, because again, I'm sorry, you guys, I kind of jumped in the wrong one. So neither Desiree or Armand can, okay, I'm right here now, I jump back up here, can transcend this stuff. It's also ironic because Desiree, for all we know, is as white can be. Well, we don't really know for sure. We couldn't bet $1 million on it and be certain of it, because it's a mystery. But we do find out definitely that Armand is half black. Okay, so they're both kind of the victims here of race and all the baggage that comes along with that. And it's tragic, because they both seem very, very happy until this child comes along and it starts becoming apparent that it ain't 100% Caucasian, okay? So, you could say in this story that race is the antagonist, while both Desiree and Armand are race is the antagonist, excuse me, while both Desiree and Armand are protagonists. Desire, man, I mean, even Desiree's name, what's that? Desire, right? So The desire for love is a key feature in this story, and I talked a little bit about that in the introduction to the course. These two people love each other, and it's made them very, 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 very happy. Happiness that neither had ever experienced or maybe even expected. Desire for Desiree seems to be simple in its nature. Things are coming out pretty good for her given her situation. However, it's a bit more complex for Armand, okay? He not only desires Desiree, he desires wealth, status, power, and the respect of his fellow plantation owners. Of course, when the baby comes along, the stakes get a lot higher for both characters, especially Armand, but also for Desiree. So loss. So the obvious point is the loss of love, okay? Less obvious is that Desiree, who prior to marrying Armand really had no identity, she was a mystery. So she really doesn't, prior to losing her identity, she doesn't really have an identity. Of course, when she marries Armand, she starts creating a very specific kind of identity for herself. She's the wife of a wealthy plantation owner, and that comes with its own set of rules. All right. But of course, the baby comes along, and the color of the baby destroys her new sense of identity. On the other hand, Armand's awakening to his true identity that we find out at the very end, it kind of sends him into a very dark and unkind place. I think that's being kind of generous. It's an identity, if revealed, would certainly complicate, if not destroy, his life. So we always say, oh, love transcends everything, and it's gonna, yeah, no, not in this case. Because it's not that he doesn't love Desiree. He's just not in love in the idea that's what's going to happen when everybody starts figuring out this baby is black. And one of the other things, could certainly be that people are thinking, well, maybe Desiree's black because we don't know anything about her. But even worse, maybe Desiree was messing around with one of the slaves and turned up pregnant, which would even be, even worse. I mean, so how would that make Armand look? So it's very complicated for Armand, and this whole idea that, love conquers all. Yeah, not in this story. So what I want to do is I've kind of just pulled certain passages out of the story, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit. Okay. So at the beginning, this word passion, which I think passion and desire are almost synonymous in a way. I don't know what you think of that, but I kind of think they are. And this is about Armand, okay? The passion that awoke in him that day when he saw her at the gate swept along like an avalanche, like a prairie fire, like anything that drives headlong over all obstacles. Okay? So, and again, I think Desiree's name is just really symbolic for desire. I think passion and desire are kind of the same. So Monsieur Valmont, this is Madame Valmont's husband, grew practical and wanted things well considered. That is, the girl's obscure origin. So he wanted to, you need to really think about this. He was telling Armand, hey, we don't really know. This could turn out not really good for you. But Armand, doesn't matter. He looked in her eyes and did not care. He was reminded that she was nameless. What did it matter about a name when he could give her one of the oldest and proudest in Louisiana? So, I mean, there's status here, And then he ordered some fancy stuff from Paris, and they got married. This gives us a little insight into Armand, okay? That's young Aubigny, okay? Armand's rule was a strict one too, and under it, his Negroes had forgotten how to be gay, as they had been during the old master's easygoing and indulgent lifetime. Okay. So this paragraph, I didn't copy this, but this part of the story, this is when Madame Valmont was coming to the plantation, And she describes it, you know, it used to be such a sad place that could be brightened by the presence of Desiree. And so what the idea is that under Armand's father, he was pretty good to the slaves. You know, he wasn't mean to them. He took good care of them, you know, whatever that is. But Armand, since he took over and his dad died, he was not very nice to slaves. He was kind of a meanie. So, okay, so this kind of provides a contrast between his father's treatment of the slaves and Armand's strict rule. And later it's noted in the story how since he married Desiree, and we'll look at that later, he'd become much kinder to the slaves. So, naturally Armand doesn't seem to be the greatest guy in the world. Here's where the part where things start really coming off the rails. Okay, so this is where Madame Valmont bent her portly figure over Desiree and kissed her, holding her and tenderly in her arms. Then she returned to the child. "This is not the baby," she exclaimed in startled tones. She said this in French. And then Desiree, you know, she thinks it doesn't have anything to do with the shade of this baby. And the way he cries went on, Desiree, is deafening. Armand heard him the other day as far away as La Blanche's cabin. And, you know, Mrs. Valmont, Madame Valmont is looking at this baby like, man, there's something really, really wrong here. And she kind of says, well, yeah, the baby has grown and changed, and then asks what Armand says. And Desiree just became suffused with the glow that was happiness itself. Okay, so again, you're starting to see this notion of identity kind of creeping in, okay? We get that there's this, you know, in this community or this culture, you know, the Valmonts and Armand, you know, these plantation owners are kind of at the top of the totem pole, okay? But, you know, again, this position in society is only reserved for one and only one race, okay? And it's interesting because I didn't put this part in here, but the house slave, Zandrine, I mean, she knows what's going on. She, you know, she just plays dumb. She doesn't want to cause any problems, okay? She kind of knows her place. So she, well, here it is. Valmont looks at Zandrine, she's just, don't want anything to do with this. I'll just look across the fields. All right, so we're kind of moving along in the story now, and she's kind of talking about, you know, how happy Armand is. You know, he hasn't punished one of them, not one of them. These are the slaves, and that kind of goes back to what I was just talking about. And even the ones that pretended to burn his leg that he might rest from work, he just laughed, called this guy a scamp. But then she says this really, really interesting thing here, and I think it's sort of like foreshadowing, or like, you know, there's something on the horizon, a storm brewing. And Desiree says this: "I'm so happy, it frightens me." Now, we don't normally think of these two things going together, I would think, okay? And I find it's interesting that Chopin does this. It's this really contradictory kind of an idea here, all right? So here's the big epiphany, the big climax, and I kind of hate the word epiphany, but I'll use it anyway. So 3 years old, there was something in the air menacing her peace. It was too subtle to grasp. Okay, so sounds like there'd been a little buzz among the slaves, and people are showing up at the house she didn't invite to kind of see what's going on. And then Armand changes. Okay. He wouldn't look at her. Okay, that old love light seemed to have gone out. He didn't come home. And then she says, in the very spirit of Satan seemed suddenly to take hold of him in his dealings with the slaves. Desiree was miserable enough to die. Now, you look at this here, so happy it frightens me. Now she's miserable enough to die. So this kind of is like this self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. And Desiree gets it. Okay. Desiree's eyes had been fixed absently and sadly upon the baby. While she was striving to penetrate the threatening mist that she felt closing about her, she looked from her child to the boy who stood beside him and back again and over and over. Ah, it was a cry that she could not help, which she was not conscious of having uttered. And then she has this enlightenment, okay? The blood turned like ice in her veins and a clammy moisture gathered upon her face. She gets it now. She says, "Oh, she gets what the problem is. She gets why everything's changing. She gets why Armand is starting to not be nice to the slaves anymore. She gets why people are showing up to see, this scandal apparently. She gets why the slaves are kind of, buzzing about this. Takes her a while, but she gets it. And the full impact of what all this means. I mean, she's a woman of this culture of this time. I mean, she gets what's at stake here. I mean, she's not naive, she's like, oh, everything's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. Not at all. There's no transcending this. None. The only way of transcending this is if you're fortunate enough to be able to sneak your wife away to Paris like the dad does, and just keep her in exile there forever. Don't have her around. He kind of pulled it off. But, we find out at the end, obviously, that it's not going to work out. Armand doesn't have that luxury because everybody knows Desiree. Okay, so now he's just telling her it's over. And basically, kind of the big idea is it means the child is not white. It means you're not white, which means everything. And she knows this. Just, shall I go? Yes, go. Do you want me to go? Yes, I want you to go. Now, Armand, he feels like, oh my God, what did I do to piss you off, God? He thought Almighty God had dealt cruelly and unjustly with him. It's unfair. He felt somehow he was paying him back in kind when he stabbed thus into his wife's soul. Stabbed, not physically, but into her soul. He no longer loved her because of the unconscious injury she had brought upon his home. Unconscious means she didn't know. Nobody knew. But he doesn't love her because of that. Okay, it's her fault. And it brought upon his home and his name. She's gonna sully the fine Aubigny name. So now this is interesting. Okay, so Desiree immediately just grabs the baby and goes. And she doesn't go to Madame Valmont's. If you remember in the story, Madame Valmont said, just come home. Just we'll deal with it. You're fine here. We'll keep you safe. Just you and the baby come here. We'll figure something out. That's not the direction she goes when she walks off. And she walks basically out into the swamps. And I wonder, I don't know what happens. And I always, one of the things I talk about with students quite a bit is, well, what do you think she does? Where does she go? Does she just say, I'm just going to walk out in the swamp and we're going to both just die? Is it kind of like a suicide? I mean, what's she got left? What future does she have for her and that baby? The dismal, horrible one, probably. Boy, and especially when, you knew kind of this other life. So I don't know the answer to it. I think the jury's out. I don't know that there's any way we could, well, we probably could, but I'm not going to do it. Go find evidence of this. But the one thing you do know is she knows it's over. So at the very end of the story, these are kind of the last 4 paragraphs here, I believe. Armand has decided to kind of clean house. Okay. So he gets a big bonfire going and just starts burning everything that has to do, every trace of Desiree and the baby, basically kind of a cremation, you ever heard somebody say, oh, you're dead to me? This is kind of the end game of that. So he finds this little bundle of letters. These are things that Desiree had sent him. And then there was one in the back drawer from which but it wasn't Desiree's. It was an old letter from his mother to his father. And remember, his mother is in France. He's never seen her. We read it. And the mother was thanking God for the blessing of her husband's love, which is kind of ironic because the dad kind of, given the situation, probably did the best he could do. Armand, he just did the opposite. He just said, you're dead. You're gone. This never happened. Out of here. And then this is what the mother wrote. But above all, she wrote, night and day, I thank the good God for having so arranged our lives that our dear Armand will never know that his mother, who adores him, belongs to the race that is cursed with the brand of slavery. So the mom knows it and the dad knows it. And even the mom knows if there's any chance of a good life and survival for this boy, Armand, she's got to be out of the picture. Now, she was fortunate that, she was sent to Europe, and I'm sure the dad took care of her. So, in this story, we just see, it's a tragic, tragic, tragic story. But we kind of get to see all these elements play together. I mean, there's loss, there's, the thing about transcendence is transcendence kind of can work two ways. One, we can transcend things, and the other we can't. Okay. This one, there's no transcendence, not for Armand, not for Desiree. Doesn't even put up a fight. That's how she knows how hopeless it is. She doesn't even put up a fight. She's fine, So I kind of hope that helps you kind of understand some things in the story that, maybe, you missed or didn't think about before. So I'll be, for every story, I'm going to try to do one of these. I know this isn't fancy, but I think it gets the job done. I'll also post just a hard copy of this document, so you can just read through it if you want, for a future writing assignment or something if we need to. Any feedback on this lecture, I'd be happy to hear. So hopefully it kind of helps. I kind of just do this the way I would probably do it in a classroom, trying to replicate that as much as possible. All right, so yeah, that'll be it.